Hello, family. Welcome to our channel where we bring you exciting story. Please subscribe to this channel because it means so much to us. Kindly like, comment, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss any of our story. Note, you can click on the CC icon on the screen if the subtitle is not showing. Sit back and enjoy.
"You locked my dog out of his own yard?" I yelled, pointing at the padlocked gate while my golden retriever barked furiously on the other side, tail wagging like he thought this was just a weird game. Karen, draped in her signature floral kimono and clutching her HOA clipboard like it was the Constitution itself, gave me the smuggest grin I've ever seen. "Community safety," she declared, like that explained anything. The absurdity didn't hit me until I realized my own security camera had captured her personally slapping a chain and padlock on the shared access path, just minutes before my dog trotted off for his morning adventure. The best part? She waved to the camera after she did it. The shared path had always been a simple, peaceful shortcut. It ran along the side of my house and led to a public park that half the neighborhood used. Parents with strollers, teens on bikes, elderly couples taking slow walk. It wasn't grand, but it was essential. It also technically sat on a weird sliver of land sandwiched between private properties. It was never part of the HOA jurisdiction, but no one really questioned it. That is, until Karen got herself elected as interim HOA chair during last fall's pumpkin patch election, after bribing folks with gluten-free brownies. At first, Karen's new role seemed harmless. She emailed newsletters with overuse of Comic Sans, hosted HOA yoga sessions at 6 a.m. that no one attended, and handed out printed notices that warned of such grave offenses as wind chime noise pollution and excessively decorative mailboxes. But when she started messing with the path, that's when things escalated. It was a Monday morning, and I had just brewed my first cup of coffee when I noticed Max, my retriever, hadn't come back from his usual trot to the park. I called him. Nothing. I walked outside in my bathrobe and saw him pawing at the gate, looking utterly confused. That's when I spotted the shiny new padlock and the hand-scrawled laminated sign hanging from it like a trophy. Private access. HOA members only, approved by Safety Policy 4.7b. I had never even heard of that policy. I stormed over to Karen's place, Max in tow, leash still dangling from his collar. Her house, the self-declared HOA palace, had flags for every season and a doorbell camera that probably fed straight into an underground bunker. She opened the door already smiling, as if she'd been expecting me. "We're protecting the community," she chirped, not even pretending to hide the condescension in her voice. "There have been unsupervised animals and unfamiliar individuals using that walkway." "You mean my dog and Mrs. Alvarez's grandkids?" I asked, trying to suppress my eye twitch. She raised a finger and flipped open her clipboard like she was about to cast a spell. "Section 4.7b, she repeated, tapping the page with her pen. I squinted at it. It was clearly a low-resolution printout, complete with typos and a watermark that read, "Sample Template." I took a deep breath and walked away. That's when the real plans started forming. Back at home, I pulled up property records. I'd always assumed the HOA controlled that path, but a few clicks later, I found out something interesting. The land under the path wasn't actually HOA managed. It had never been formally handed over. It still belonged to the original developer. That's when the light bulb lit up brighter than Karen's solar-powered porch gnomes. I remembered hearing that the developer, a retired guy named Walt, still lived just outside the city. I gave him a call, introduced myself, and asked about the path. To my surprise, he remembered it instantly. "Oh, that old footpath? Yeah, never finalized the transfer. The HOA didn't want to cover liability insurance back then, so I held on to it. Why do you ask?" I paused and smiled. "Walt, how would you feel about selling it?" We met that Thursday at a diner off the highway. Walt was the kind of man who wore suspenders over a flannel shirt and used phrases like "dag nabbit" unironically. We had coffee, shared some laughs, and by the time the check came, I had a signed agreement. Walt was thrilled to offload the easement, and I was now the proud owner of a 75-foot strip of land that ran straight through the heart of Karen's kingdom. Back in the neighborhood, the gossip spread faster than wildfire. But I didn't say anything, not yet. I called in a few favors from my contractor buddy, and we made some discreet upgrades. The padlock came off, replaced with a sleek black electronic gate with a card reader. A cedar fence was added to clearly mark the private boundary. At the entrance, we placed a custom wooden sign with elegant gold lettering that read, "Private walkway, VIP keycard access, only property of my name." The next morning, Karen woke up to find the gate she thought she controlled had transformed into Fort Knox. She stormed over in her pink slippers, tried to yank the gate, and nearly sprained her shoulder. She shouted for me from the sidewalk. I sipped my coffee on the porch and waved cheerfully. "Did you do this?" she screeched. "Nope," I replied. "The new owner did." "I am the HOA," she screamed. "And I'm the landowner," I smiled, holding up the deed like a golden ticket. It was a moment I'll never forget. Her jaw dropped so hard I thought I'd hear it hit the pavement. The best part? My security camera caught every second of it, including the exact moment she realized she'd just been locked out of the very path she tried to control. The real fun was just beginning. I hadn't handed out any keycards yet, and people were already asking how they could get one. I had plans, big ones, but Karen didn't know that. All she knew was that her iron grip on the community just slipped right through her well-manicured fingers. And the look on her face? Worth every penny. By the time the neighborhood woke up to the freshly installed VIP gate, the buzz had already begun. Texts flew across community group chats like wildfire. Photos of the black keypad gate spread alongside blurry images of the cedar fence and the elegant sign I'd installed overnight. "Is this a joke?" one neighbor messaged. "Did Karen upgrade the lock again?" someone else asked. But the truth became clear when they read the sign. "Private walkway, VIP keycard access, only property of my name." And just like that, my quiet little revenge had become the community's hottest topic. At 7:08 a.m., the show began. I was sipping coffee on the porch again, this time with Max lying peacefully by my side, when Karen marched down the street like she was on her way to lead a parade. Clipboard in hand, pink visor secured tightly to her head, and 3 other HOA members trailing behind her like nervous ducklings. She reached the gate and immediately tried the keypad, tapping it with her index finger like it might respond to her sheer willpower. Nothing happened. She typed 0000 and 1234 and even care before slapping the machine in frustration. That's when she noticed me watching. "You can't just take over public access," she yelled. "It's not public," I replied calmly. "And it was never yours. It's mine now. Bought and paid for." Her face turned a color I'd only seen on overly ripe tomatoes. "You think this little stunt is funny?" she shouted. "People need this path." "Oh, now it's important?" I asked. "Because 2 days ago you were the one locking kids and pets out of it." The crowd started to grow as more neighbors gathered to see what the fuss was about. Parents with backpacks, joggers taking a break, even Mr. Peterson from 2 streets down who hadn't left his house in a month was standing near the gate, watching. One guy even brought popcorn. I gave him a nod of appreciation. Karen turned to the crowd and made the worst mistake possible. "He's using private ownership to gatekeep a community resource." That's when the murmurs started. People weren't on her side, not after what she did. They remembered the padlock. They remembered the time she ticketed Mrs. Alvarez for having a flower pot that clashed with her front door. And they definitely remembered how she used HOA funds to install fake security cameras that never worked. One of the parents, James, stepped forward. "You're the reason this happened, Karen. You made up rules. You locked it without a vote. Now you're mad someone played smarter." Karen looked like she might combust on the spot. "He's handing out keycards selectively." That's discrimination. Actually, I interjected, standing up with Max at my heel, it's private property. I can give access to whoever I want. Just like how you denied path use to me, my dog, and half this community with zero explanation. Her expression flickered. This was the part she didn't see coming. She thought I would be angry, emotional, maybe even come groveling to get my dog access again. She never expected the quiet route. The paperwork route. The route that ended with her slamming into a wall of legality she couldn't bulldoze. That afternoon, I began distributing keycards. Not at random, but to specific people, those who had stood up against Karen in past HOA meetings, those who had emailed me offering support, and especially those who'd been directly inconvenienced by her antic. Kids like Leo and Ava, who had been forced to walk an extra 20 minutes to school after the lock went up, got shiny new passes. Mr. Nguyen, who used the walkway daily to get to his community garden, received his with a handwritten note. Thank you for always sharing your tomatoes. The look on Karen's face when she saw the keycards being passed out was priceless. She marched up to me that evening, wearing a scarf despite the heat, and said, "Fine. I want a keycard too. You've made your point." I stared at her for a moment, then smiled politely. "I'm sorry. VIP access is for those who value the community." She blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language. "But I am the community." "No," I said, walking away, "you're just the one who tried to gate it." The next morning, her husband Todd stopped by. He was more apologetic, sheepish even. He tried to make small talk about football, then chuckled awkwardly. "Hey, listen, I didn't know she was gonna go all lock and key crazy. We just thought we were keeping things safe." I raised an eyebrow. "You called my bird feeder an aerial hazard last year." He scratched the back of his neck. "That was, yeah, okay. Fair. But still, she's just wound tight. You know how she is." "I do," I said. "And that's why she's not getting a keycard." To his credit, Todd didn't push it. He gave a small wave and shuffled back down the sidewalk. By Friday, the walkway had become a phenomenon. Someone put fairy lights on the gate. Another person added a flower bed on one side with a plaque that read Freedom Lane. A group of kids had already created a game where they swiped their cards and did a little victory dance before heading through. People started referring to the easement as the VIP lane, and some even offered to help maintain it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Karen, who wanted so badly to control the path and wield power over the community, was now the only one locked out. She spent hours outside the fence, trying to reason with people. She even attempted to fake cry one afternoon when a group of seniors walked past her with their walkers and freshly minted keycards. No one stopped. That night, I stood on my porch and watched the lights flicker gently on the new VIP gate. Max was curled up at my feet, snoring. The sky was clear and the air smelled like freedom. Not the patriotic kind, but the kind where you finally beat a tyrant at their own game without raising your voice. The satisfaction wasn't just in winning. It was in watching the community come together around something positive. It was in seeing people smile again. And most of all, it was knowing that for the first time in a long time, Karen couldn't write her way out of this one with a clipboard and a passive-aggressive email. This wasn't her HOA domain anymore. This was mine. By the time the weekend rolled around, I knew Karen wouldn't let the whole VIP lane situation slide without throwing one of her signature tantrums, but even I wasn't prepared for how far she was willing to go. On Sunday morning, I received a knock on the door from a man in an ill-fitting suit holding a stack of papers and a clipboard. He squinted at me like he'd memorized the wrong address. "You are being served," he said, handing over what looked like a cheap copy of legal documents printed from a home printer. As soon as I flipped through the pages and saw Karen's name in bold block letters at the top with the phrase, "Civil Action," I let out an audible groan. Of course. She was suing me. The documents were riddled with misspellings and generic accusations like infringement of communal rights and emotional duress caused by exclusion from historically shared property. She even quoted fictional laws, including one from Article 9 of Neighborhood Harmony and Equity, which, upon a quick Google search, turned out to be a line from a community etiquette blog written in 2009. But what really made me laugh was the name of the representing attorney. Kevin B. Withrow, ESQ. I had never heard of him, so I looked him up. Turns out, he wasn't exactly a real lawyer. His profile said legal consultant and notary public, specializing in neighborhood law, and his office address was a UPS store. Despite the absurdity, I didn't want to risk anything by ignoring it, so I contacted my own attorney, an actual one named Priya, who had helped me once before with a zoning dispute. She took one look at the papers and burst out laughing on the call. "This isn't a lawsuit," she said. "This is a printed hissy fit." But she agreed to handle it properly, just in case Karen found a way to drag it into small claims court. A week later, we showed up in municipal court. I wore a suit. Karen wore a power blazer that looked 2 sizes too tight and carried 3 different binders labeled with color-coded tab. Her lawyer, Kevin, looked like a guy who once sold timeshares. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Ellis, clearly wasn't amused from the moment we walked in. Karen launched into her opening statement, practically shaking with fury. She claimed I had stolen a sacred communal space, and that I was intentionally dividing the neighborhood with elitist behavior. She said I was manipulating vulnerable residents with the allure of exclusivity. Kevin added something about legal loopholes being abused by wealthy homeowners, even though my house was smaller than hers. It was dramatic, it was long-winded, and it was completely detached from reality. Then it was Priya's turn. She stood, calm and collected, and handed the judge a single folder with 3 documents inside: the original easement plat map, the signed deed from the developer, and a copy of the email where Karen had announced the padlock installation without any HOA vote or safety justification. Judge Ellis read them silently, her expression unreadable. "And who owns the land the walkway sits on?" she asked. "I do," I said. "As of 3 weeks ago. And the HOA never legally owned it?" "No, Your Honor." "And Ms. Karen Harper locked the gate before that?" "Yes, Your Honor. Without approval from the full HOA board." Judge Ellis turned to Karen. "Did you obtain a majority vote for the padlock installation?" Karen shuffled her papers like they were suddenly in the wrong order. "It was an executive decision made under emergency powers outlined in the HOA charter." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Emergency powers? For what emergency, exactly?" "There were rumors," Karen said. "Suspicious individuals, dogs running without leashes. There was potential danger." Priya interjected. "There were no police reports filed. No complaints recorded. Just Karen's handwritten notes and fake citations." Karen's voice began rising. "He's weaponizing property ownership to divide this community. He's creating a class system." Judge Ellis looked utterly unimpressed. "You mean like when you locked out everyone who didn't agree with you?" That silenced the room. The final nail came when Priya played a security video I'd provided, footage from my front yard, showing Karen personally chaining the gate shut and waving smugly at the camera. The courtroom burst into quiet chuckles. Even Kevin the lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The judge issued her ruling right there. Karen's claim was dismissed with prejudice. She was ordered to pay my legal fees. But that wasn't all. The court ordered an audit of the HOA's spending, particularly the funds used to install the original padlock and signs. Judge Ellis even included a line in the order stating that HOA actions, taken unilaterally without board consensus or valid jurisdiction, shall be considered invalid and subject to community review. It was a mic-drop moment. As we walked out of court, a few neighbors who had come to watch congratulated me. One even offered to pay for lunch. Karen stormed past us, ranting into her phone about appeals and rebuilding the board with Real allies. No one followed her. Kevin peeled off the other way, muttering something about having to check on another case in Reseda, which I doubted was real. The fallout back home was immediate. Word spread like wildfire. The HOA was officially put under review, and a temporary committee was formed to assess Karen's actions. She wasn't suspended yet, but her power was definitely cracked. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up before started voicing their frustrations openly. Mrs. Alvarez hosted an impromptu backyard wine night where people shared Karen horror stories like war veterans trading tales. One woman admitted she'd been fined for lawn gnome overpopulation. Another man said Karen had tried to measure the shade distance from his maple tree to determine if it violated her solar panel code. That night, I added a new feature to the VIP gate, a small motion sensor speaker that played a light chime sound and flashed a soft green light when someone used their keycard successfully. It wasn't just functional. It was symbolic. A gentle, glowing reminder that the path was no longer a battleground, but a haven. Max sat beside me as I watched a young couple walk their toddler through the VIP lane, pausing to wave at me. The father mouthed a quiet "thank you." I nodded back. Moments like that made all the planning and court time worth it. Karen had tried to turn a peaceful neighborhood into her private empire. But in the end, it was her own arrogance that dug the moat she now found herself on the wrong side of. What she didn't realize was that the real strength of a community doesn't come from rules or power, it comes from respect. And once you lose that, even your biggest clipboard won't save you. In the days following the court ruling, a strange calm settled over the neighborhood. It was the kind of quiet that felt earned, like the sigh of relief after a thunderstorm passes. For once, there were no passive-aggressive flyers slipped under doors, no surprise inspection notices, no Karen pacing the sidewalks with her clipboard like a mall cop with a grudge. People smiled more. Conversations lasted longer. The walkway that had sparked the whole ordeal was now a blooming symbol of quiet rebellion, draped in ivy, lit by solar lamps, and guarded by a modest gate that had somehow become legendary. It started as a joke, really. Someone taped a small paper crown to the top of the gate with the words VIP Lane is King written in glitter pen. A group of high schoolers made a short video pretending to swipe into the elite zone, complete with dramatic music and slow-motion strut. It went semi-viral in the local Facebook group. Within a week, neighbors began leaving small tokens by the entrance. Painted rocks, flower pots, even a tiny bench carved with the words freedom from clipboard. It was as if the whole street had decided to use joy as resistance. With the HOA's authority shaken and Karen temporarily stripped of decision-making powers pending a financial audit, the board held an emergency town hall meeting. It was supposed to be about budget reallocation and leadership restructuring, but it quickly turned into something else entirely. One by one, neighbors stood up and aired grievances that had clearly been festering for years. Mr. Callahan, the usually silent man from the corner lot, revealed that Karen had fined him for putting his trash bins out 5 minutes early, on his own driveway. Mrs. Jensen said her granddaughter was once yelled at for riding a scooter too enthusiastically. Even the HOA president, who had been absent from many of Karen's decisions, admitted that he'd been intimidated into silence by her aggressive tactics and endless barrage of pseudo-legal threat. The meeting ended with a motion to temporarily remove Karen from the HOA board until the audit was complete. The vote passed by an overwhelming majority. Karen wasn't present, of course. She was still claiming on Nextdoor that the entire neighborhood had been brainwashed by a path-dwelling narcissist. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The community had done it for me. Later that week, a group of neighbors gathered by the walkway to hold what they jokingly called the Freedom to Walk barbecue. It wasn't fancy, just some lawn chairs, a portable grill, and an impromptu speaker system playing light jazz, but it was the most unified the neighborhood had ever felt. Kids ran up and down the walkway playing tag. Elderly couples shared folding chairs and gossip. Even the former HOA president showed up with a cooler full of soda and an apology I didn't expect. He thanked me for standing up when others wouldn't and handed me a certificate he printed himself that read local legend of the lane. At one point during the evening, Karen's husband Todd wandered over. He didn't say much, just hovered at the edge of the celebration like a man unsure which side of history he belonged on. I walked up and handed him a paper plate with a burger on it. "You're welcome to join," I said. "Even if you're not VIP." He gave a weak smile and nodded. "Thanks. I don't think she's ever going to forgive you, you know." I shrugged. "She's not the one I was trying to help." That was the truth. This whole thing was never about revenge. It was about fairness. It just so happened that fairness required locking Karen out of her own petty empire. A few days after the barbecue, I got a letter in the mail from a local community columnist who had heard about the situation and wanted to interview me for a feature. At first I hesitated, not wanting to turn the whole thing into some kind of viral sideshow, but then I realized the power of the story wasn't in my ownership of the path. It was in how the community reclaimed its voice. I agreed, and the article came out under the title, "How One Man's Fence Rebuilt a Neighborhood." It was dramatic, sure, but it captured the spirit of what had happened. That same week, Karen tried to stage a comeback. She put up a petition on the HOA board calling for the path to be reintegrated into community control. It was filled with language about fairness and shared resources, but it failed to mention that the path was never theirs to begin with. The petition didn't go far. Only 4 people signed it. One of them was her cousin from another neighborhood, and the others later admitted they hadn't read the whole thing. The board rejected it outright, citing not only the court ruling but also the glaring absence of public support. In a final act of desperation, Karen attempted to submit a complaint to City Hall claiming that my gate violated urban aesthetic guidelines. She attached blurry photos taken at night and a 3-paragraph essay about how the cedar smelled too rustic. Unfortunately for her, the city zoning officer assigned to the case happened to be a former classmate of mine from college. He called me, laughing, and told me that not only was I well within my rights, but I could also apply for a beautification grant if I wanted to enhance the path further. The irony made my week. So I did. I used the funds to add a small wooden arch over the entrance to the walkway, hand-painted by a local artist. It read, "Welcome, friends." A few neighbors helped me install it, and we celebrated the moment with lemonade and brownies. Someone jokingly whispered, "It's like HOA-proof Narnia back here," and we all laughed. That night, I sat on the bench at the edge of the path with Max lying beside me. The lights flickered on one by one, casting a soft glow over the trimmed hedges and winding stonework. It didn't look like a battleground anymore. It looked like what it was always meant to be, a shared place of peace, where people could connect, talk, and breathe freely without being weighed down by pettiness or fear of being written up for having the wrong shade of tulip. I thought about how something as small as a lock could spark a transformation, not just of a path, but of a community. And even though the battle wasn't fought with fists or fire, it had been every bit as important. Because this wasn't about who could bark the loudest, it was about who had the patience to wait, listen, and take the smarter route. And in the end, that's the path everyone wanted to walk. Karen's last act of defiance was as theatrical as everything else she had tried. She marched up to the gate one morning wearing a business suit and heels far too pointy for a suburban sidewalk. In her hand was a rolled-up scroll, sealed with a red ribbon like it came from a medieval royal court. She banged on the keypad box with her fist until I stepped out onto my porch. I was mid-bite into a cinnamon bagel and wearing a hoodie with coffee stains down the front, but she treated the moment like a courtroom finale. "This," she declared, unrolling the scroll dramatically, "is a certified petition signed by the residents of our community, requesting full reinstatement of HOA oversight over this easement." Her voice echoed down the street like she had rehearsed it. I walked down to the gate calmly, wiping my hands on a napkin. "Karen," I said, "this isn't Game of Thrones. You don't need a scroll." I looked at the paper. It was covered in 6 signatures. 2 were illegible, and 1 belonged to her cat, apparently. I glanced at the names. 1 was her cousin, another was Todd, probably forced into it. The others were neighbors who had already asked me if they could rescind their support after reading the fine print. She wasn't done. "I've submitted this to City Hall," she announced. "They will be reviewing your violation of shared public trust." I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean the same City Hall official who sent me a congratulatory email last week about the path getting featured in the local paper?" Her face twitched. "Also," I added, "that same official signed my permit for the new seating benches I'm installing next month." I believe his words were, "Finally something not beige in this neighborhood." Karen stared at me for a few seconds, jaw set like she was holding back a primal scream. "You think this is over? You think, just because you got your little path and your fancy VIP gate and your articles and your fan club, that I'm just going to disappear?" I tilted my head. "I don't need you to disappear, Karen. I just need you to stop making everyone else's life harder. That's it. That's all anyone ever wanted." For once, she didn't have a comeback. She turned on her heel and walked off, heels clicking in sharp retreat. A few days later, the final HOA vote took place. With Karen suspended, the board held an official election to fill her seat. For the first time in recent history, there was genuine community interest. People who had never attended a meeting showed up to vote. There were candidates who spoke about real improvements, community gardens, youth activities, better transparency. No one even whispered about padlocks or power trip. Karen ran unofficially as a write-in, handing out tiny flyers at the local bakery and standing outside the community center with a sign that said, "HOA Strong." She received 5 votes. Todd didn't vote for her. He later told me he wrote in Max the dog as a joke. With the new board in place, the HOA began to repair its image. They released a public statement acknowledging past errors in judgment and reaffirmed that property owners' rights would be respected moving forward. They even issued a formal apology to me and a thank you note for setting a precedent for positive neighbor engagement. It was unexpectedly sincere. That weekend, the board hosted a community appreciation event. It was a potluck picnic held right at the entrance of the VIP walkway. The same walkway that had once been a point of division was now the centerpiece of unity. People brought food, set up folding tables, and turned the small clearing near the path into a temporary party zone. Kids chalked messages on the sidewalk like, "Thank you for the path," and "Max for Mayor." An elderly neighbor played the ukulele. Someone brought a karaoke machine. It wasn't just a picnic. It was a victory lap for everyone who'd been tired of walking on eggshells. Toward the end of the event, one of the new board members tapped a spoon on a glass and asked for quiet. "We wanted to honor the person who reminded us that leadership is about listening, not lecturing," she said. "And who reminded us how powerful one simple path can be." She held up a small box and handed it to me. Inside was a golden keycard. Literally gold-plated. Not functional, just symbolic. It had my name engraved on it and the words Pathkeeper of Peace underneath. It was ridiculous and perfect. Everyone clapped. Max barked twice, as if accepting on my behalf. Later that evening, I walked the path slowly, holding the golden keycard between my fingers. The sun was setting, casting amber light across the stones and the edges of the cedar fence. The archway now had tiny string lights running along its curve, and the benches had little plaques dedicated to different families. It was no longer just a walkway, it was a timeline of everything we'd been through together. From silent frustration to shared celebration. As I reached the end of the path, I spotted Karen on the far sidewalk, arms crossed, watching. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just stood there for a moment, divided by something much more than a gate. Eventually, she turned and walked away. And I kept walking forward. Owning the easement hadn't just changed the dynamics of the neighborhood. It had shown people what could happen when someone stood up not with fists, but with facts. Not by shouting louder, but by outsmarting the noise. What started as one woman's attempt to control a community had turned into a movement powered by cooperation, humor, and just the right dose of pettiness. It reminded me that sometimes the most ordinary places, a footpath, a side gate, a strip of land no one thinks about, can become battlegrounds for bigger ideas. Fairness, kindness, boundaries. And when those battles are fought right, they leave behind more than just stories. They leave behind a community stronger than before. And maybe, just maybe, a dog named Max who now thinks he owns the whole block.